Well, for our 22 viewers online, I want to thank all of you for joining us and welcome you to the kickoff of our 19th Amendment Centennial Series of online events hosted by Sonoma County 2020 Women's Suffrage Project. This year-long project has been committed to celebrating the centennial of the 19th Amendment with goals of education, empowerment, equality, and inclusion. While we have embarked on celebrating 100 years of women's right to vote, we have also worked to create programming which explores the complex, long history and continuing fight for inclusion of all women, including women of color, trans women, and non-binary individuals. Tonight, as you're all joining us, this is the historic 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. I'm sorry, I just got a little bit of chills. Ensuring when that ratification happened that it was then to be signed on August 26th into constitutional law. So today, August 18th, is special for our kickoff and also for that 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. We are honored to be joined by co-founder and executive director Molly MacGregor. She is of the National Women's History Alliance, and the curator of an upcoming exhibit of women's suffrage in Petaluma, Paula Freund. I am Leslie Graves, the co-chair of the Sonoma County Women's Suffrage Project, and I will be your moderator for tonight. For those of you that are participating on Zoom, I will try my best to leave a few minutes at the end of our presentation for you to ask questions. And we hope to end about 6:30. It should take us about an hour. So with that, thank you, Paula and Molly, for joining me. And I want to get started with our questions for tonight. We'll start with you, Molly. We want to really acknowledge that we are living in historic times. We are not only celebrating the centennial of the 19th Amendment, but we are experiencing a pandemic. We have social unrest. We want to desperately make sure that Black Lives Matter. Just like the women of the suffrage movement were fighting for their lives to matter. History is happening all around us, and it's happening right now. Molly, you're also celebrating quite a milestone, and I want to include that, the 40th anniversary of the National Women's History Alliance, which you founded right here in Sonoma County, and at that time was called the National Women's History Project. Can you tell us a little bit about what motivated you? And I believe it was 4 other women that you co-founded that project with, and why you dedicated the entire life's work of Molly Murphy MacGregor to writing women's history back into books and into the history curriculum for children and young adults.
Well, I'm sure the 4 of us had different motivations, Betty Morgan, Mary Roosdotter, Paula Hammett, and Maria Cuevas. But my motivation came from having been a high school teacher and having a student ask me in 1972, what is the women's movement? And I was only like 24 years old, and these kids were like 17. So I tried to look as smart, as intelligent as I possibly could, paused for a moment, and I didn't have a clue what this kid, 1972, that's the year Shirley Chisholm runs for President of the United States. Title IX is written to be enacted in 77. Barbara Jordan is actually elected. Ms. Magazine is published. It's a banner year in women's history, and I am a social studies teacher. So I pause and I say to my students, that's a great question. Let's divide into groups and look at that question from the perspective of the government, of the church, of society, as many different categories as I could conjure up, because, of course, the question always determines the answer. And the truth is I was stalling. So we came up with a list, each group came up with a list of 5 questions. I went home to my sacred shrine of history books, and sure enough, one book, one chapter, was on the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848. and I just couldn't believe my own stupidity. Here I was, a married woman teaching high school, being able to wear slacks to school, never thinking, how did that happen? And then most significantly, and this is what's kept me going for way over 40 years, I realized by this time my mother had passed, and I never asked her what her life was like. I just assumed she was my mom. I mean, she was my mom who had 3 children before she was 21. She was 39, and she had 9 children altogether. Just this extraordinary woman, and so that's been my motivation. And then when I came together with Mary and Paula and Betty and Maria, we all had different reasons, but we all knew how important it was that children grew up with a sense of role models. Children grew up with the knowledge of who women are and what we have done. So that's been my motivation then. It continues to be my motivation today. And my mother, her name is Edna Genevieve MacGregor Murphy, was always, the center of why every time I thought, is this really important? I thought, yeah, this is really important.
That's amazing. So just to hear you talk about your mom and that history, I think that all of us connect in some way to our histories of our moms and our grandmothers and our elders, and it's very important. And you're passing along some of that history of the world's elders, really, in your life's work of being dedicated to the National Women's History Alliance and furthering that on. Paula, I want to take that on to you. I know that over this past year, and it's been an important year, that you have really worked with the Petaluma Museum Association for curating the upcoming exhibit, which is very exciting, getting ready to start on August 26th, so next week on Women's Equality Day. And you're actually going to be doing an online dedication, and due to the pandemic, it's an online exhibit. Can you share with us what was your motivation? Was there a person or something that inspired you to hold such an exhibit at the Petaluma Historical Museum?
Definitely. And it was my co-chair, my friend and colleague, Catherine Reinhardt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was Catherine. At that time, back in 2019, Catherine was the manager of the Sonoma County History and Genealogy Library, and she was also the president of the Sonoma County Heritage Network. And she put out this clarion call to all historical institutions and said, hey, what are you doing to celebrate the centennial? And Molly, you did this in the 70s. I did this in 2019. And I said, oh, women's suffrage, 19th Amendment, what's that? To my great embarrassment. And I thought, well, Catherine, I need to learn a little bit about this. And I looked into it, and I realized how ignorant I was on the subject, very embarrassingly so. And I called Catherine, who's my friend, and I said, Catherine, let's do something at the Petaluma Historical Library and Museum. She had been the president of the Petaluma Museum Association in years past. And I said, is there enough material? What do you think to put on an exhibit about Petaluma's participation? Because we want to be Petaluma-centric at the Petaluma Historical Library and Museum. She said, I really think there might be. And we were, I won't go, if you ask me, I'll let you know, but we were very, very pleasantly surprised that there was a very rich undiscovered history of suffrage, advocacy for suffrage in Petaluma.
Yeah, and Catherine Reinhardt, what a powerhouse. And of course she inspired you to hold the exhibit, and she's an inspirational person here in Sonoma County, knows more than we can all fathom about the history of Petaluma. And so shout out to Catherine, and thank you for taking that on and bringing that exhibit to us here. It's so important for Sonoma County and for Petaluma in Northern California that we continue on with the history and we uncover more. And I know that you'll have some discoveries for us as well. And I just want to make mention that some of you saw an extra box, an extra speaker online with the name Chris. And that would be my husband. And so, as glitches go, that's not a bad glitch to have. We were practicing our Zoom earlier, and so the link that he had was a link for a panelist instead of an attendee. So Chris, thanks for joining in. Thanks for not talking. I appreciate being able to mute you. I would think I might use that skill later on in life too. But, so we'll get back to our panel discussion here. And Paula, I want to talk to you a little bit more. You're spending that year studying the suffrage movement. Have you made any, conclusions or had any surprising moments or insights when you were doing your work that you'd like to share with us? I'm sure that there might be a couple chuckles in there.
Several. One thing I realized is the history of the history is a study within itself. And Molly can speak to that with the concept that it was all written by men and now women are starting to write it. But we see it evolving so much. And even just recently, and Molly and I were talking about it before we began, and that was the most recent PBS special that came out. I think it was just called The Vote. And in it, they emphasized the fact that women had to really fight to get the vote. It wasn't given to us, and over and over again, we were patted on the head. And when we were polite ladies, it didn't get us very far, and that we needed to be much more assertive. And that truth about the movement was really not part of the history 10 years ago. It was, weren't the men gracious to give us the vote because they were the only ones who could vote. And so the history keeps, it's not evolving, it's developing. It's becoming richer and richer and richer. And so the history of the history itself has evolved tremendously. I mean, originally, as we all know, no Black women were discussed in the suffrage history, and now we realize how vitally important they were and how many lessons there are for us to learn in understanding the history in a rich way. And I'm also amazed because it went for so many years that it was involved in so many areas of society. Political, money, gender, it was everything. So and that's why it's taken me so long to really feel that I've put my arms around it. I was trained as an art historian, and so I have some skills in studying history, but this was far more complicated and at times frustrating to really feel that I was getting my arms around it. So the history of the history, the complicated issue of it, and I guess I kind of learned a lesson that in studying it's not really men versus women or Black versus white or one religion versus the other. It really seems to be people who are in power versus people who are not in power, and people who are in power sharing power. And it made me so grateful for our nation and our balance of power within our government, the division of the three houses, and seeing that being compromised is so distressing. So, because that's why our government has been democratic at all, because there is a division of power which forces people to share power. And now we're going about might become a revolution to share more power. So it's all about sharing power.
Yeah, and so right on with that. I mean, you just really brought a lot right to the forefront. I mean, obviously a lot of our unrest right now, I mean, look what we're doing. We're really fighting powers that we didn't know that would even be as great as they are today, right? And it's a great segue too to ask Molly a couple questions, because when you did start the National Women's History Alliance 40 years ago, there, like you said, there wasn't much history out there. So I can only imagine that it was an uphill climb to get the history to, be in the educational institutions, to be talked about on a regular basis. And compare that to today, where we can just turn on our computers and look online and Google or social media and be able to really find women's history at our fingertips. So talk to us a little bit about those challenges of fighting the power structure of only hearing about men's history and, what it took to get people to listen to the history of women's history and really bring that to the forefront, which is something that, we wouldn't be talking the way that we're talking right now and celebrating and having a wealth of information without your work. So maybe share a little bit of that with us.
Well, our focus was the schools. We wanted our kids to have a sense of history. Our elementary and secondary teachers knew nothing about women's history. They were just like us. They had gone through school with these credentials but had never even discussed who women were, even in terms of talking about any period of history. Did anybody ever say, well, does this impact women differently than it did men, or did this impact cultural groups differently? No, everything was from a very singular, privileged white male perspective, and people didn't think of it being anything else. So when we first began, and I have to give a lot of credit to Sonoma County Schools, I went before them and I asked them if we could establish a Women's History Week, a week on the school calendar, so the teachers would have a reason to do this, right? A week on the calendar that would celebrate multicultural women's history, because from the get-go, we wanted to make sure that we were talking about all women. We selected the date of March 8th because it's International Women's Day. We wanted to talk about women, not only multicultural, but women of all cultures, and also women as workers, because this was at a time when women were beginning to really have to work outside the home. At the same time, women who worked in the home were not recognized for their work. So that was our goal. That was our first week, and that's what we began as a Women's History Week, and we provided curriculum materials to the schools, which at the time we had a CETA grant, and I'm happy to tell you that Sonoma County provided all these resources for the schools because they didn't know anything. They didn't even know who Harriet Tubman was. I mean, you just have to remember how little people knew about anything. And then the opposition that we faced is when we give them students this list of women that they could do research on, and the teachers kind of revolted. They said, who are these women? Are you just making this up? And even Mary Roostaughter, who I told you is our great convert, she said to me, are you sure you're not just making this up? Because, when you've gone to school for 5 years and studied something and realized that you knew nothing, it's a revelation. It's kind of like when they found out that, of course, Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson were having a relationship because we could prove it with a genealogy, but oh no, people still couldn't do it. So it's just hard for people to change their basic ideas, but we have seen such a change. It's been 40 years, and I tell you, every day I get maybe 25 emails from people across the country that want to make sure that we talk about the event they're doing. They don't know this, but they make me want to cry because, whether they're ladies in Kentucky who they had to postpone their event for next year, but they'll be damned. They'll be walking as suffragists on that day, and they'll be passing out leaflets for the importance of the vote. So for us, Mary has passed. Mary and Betty have both passed now. I wish they could see what has come of this, but there literally were hundreds of thousands, and I'm not exaggerating in any way, hundreds of thousands of events planned for the centennial. The good news is that many of those events are going to be also happening next year. On August 26th, they're going to dedicate the memorial in Central Park that will be Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. It will be the first statue in Central Park that's about women, other than Mother Goose. So they're gonna actually televise that, and they're going to use it as a kickoff for next year. Because one of the things we now want to embrace is that people are asking new questions. They're like curious. Are you sure? Here. How do you know that? And we have all these facts to back it up. So in this 40 years, I cannot tell you we had never ever dreamed that we would have this kind of impact. When things started happening like 3 years ago, when people started planning stuff for women's suffrage, and I'd pass it on to some of the people I used to work with, they would write me back and they said, did we have anything to do with this? And I said, no, they're doing it themselves. They're doing it themselves. We had nothing to do with it. So the National Women's History Project and Now Alliance, our major goal is to help people understand the importance of knowing who women are, of the inspiration, the tenacity, the courage that comes down to our lives because of the things that women have done. And this year, more than any other, has been the most validating, even with this virus, even with all of it. It's people in mainstream America are starting to get it, even though the news often get it wrong, because the 19th Amendment really was for women, was for white and black women. It's just that black women, especially in the South, didn't get to vote because of poll taxes and things like that. But it's a very, very complicated story, and I'm just looking forward to people learning it, knowing that women were willing to be force-fed. I mean, my God, they were political prisoners, and they were force-fed. Can you imagine a tube going down your throat on a regular basis because your principles are so strong and you so much believe in justice and you so believe that what you're doing is right, that you let these people torture you? So, yeah, it's a grand, wonderful, wonderful story, and I'm so glad that there are so many people who are learning, and we're all learning. We're learning new aspects of it all the time, the whole way that black women suffragists have now come to the forefront of understanding their contributions, their organizations, all of that is, it just really makes my day.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that. And we're in this historic time, like I mentioned earlier. It was a joy to watch Michelle Obama at the Democratic National Convention last night. How exciting last week when we had Kamala Harris named as the vice president in the running on the Biden ticket. So that history, the Black history, and the history of women of color in the suffrage movement are so important, because as Harris mentioned, she's standing on their shoulders, that she she might be a first, but it's well grounded in that. So I appreciate your work in doing that. And Paula, I know that was important to you too, in your exhibit, to make sure that those voices in Petaluma were seen and heard in your exhibit, that people realize that Petaluma suffrage movement was more than just the well-to-do white women of their time, that black women had a place in the suffrage movement, and they fought right alongside, and their voices were prevalent. So how are you bringing that forward in the exhibit that starts with the dedication on the 26th? How will black women see themselves in the Petaluma suffrage exhibit?
I have not had to work too hard to include the black individuals, thanks to the scholarship of John Sheehy. John Sheehy is a Petaluma historian, and he is an excellent one. He's an excellent researcher. He's an excellent writer. He recently published a book about the Petaluma watershed along with Scott Hess. And he has studied the black individuals in the Petaluma community from the very beginning. And it is a fascinating history. As most of us know, the suffrage movement really began in the East with abolitionists. But in California, the abolitionist movement was not as strong. So the way that the suffrage movement got started in Petaluma was through spiritualists, through people who were women, particularly who were spiritualist speakers and who spoke for suffrage. Beginning in 1869, the earliest thing that we have in the Petaluma exhibit is the establishment of the Sonoma County Woman Suffrage Association in 1869, and then in 1870 this petition. And we have 4 Black petitioners who John identified on that petition. 4 of them, 2 couples, Eliza and Cooper Smith, and Malvina and Alexander McFarland. And both of those gentlemen were trustees of the African Methodist Episcopal Church in Petaluma. So they were associated with their African Methodist Episcopal Church. And that was in 1870. We have no Black signatories on the 1878 petition. We have 2 wonderful petitions that are in the exhibit. So the history of Petaluma changed, and a lot of the Black citizens of Petaluma moved out. They moved, a lot of them moved to Vallejo. There's a big history there in Santa Rosa, which Jeff Elliott has written about so beautifully in his Santa Rosa history blog about the Black community there. So we did identify 2, and we don't have portraits of them, very unfortunately, but I do have 2 empty frames saying, if you have any further information about these 4 individuals, please let us know here at the museum, because that's our responsibility to save that heritage. So I had to skip. And really one of the masterpieces in the exhibit is this phenomenally beautiful portrait of Susan B. Anthony when she came to San Francisco to help with the 1896 campaign. And she's surrounded by who she called her nieces, which were all the other suffragists helping her. But there's a woman missing there, and that's Naomi Talbot Anderson, who was, the more I studied her, the more impressed I was with her and her ability. She was a poet. She was an authoress. She was an amazing woman. She worked for suffrage back in the East, starting in 1869. She moved to San Francisco and helped immensely in the 1896 campaign in California, which you all know failed. But she worked very hard. And I actually have a quote from her that is just beautiful, and I want to read it. They were and she spoke at a lot of the African Methodist Episcopal churches as well, and she really stumped. And the amount of articles about her that you can find in newspapers.com were many articles dedicated to her, and she was really very deeply respected, Naomi Talbot Anderson. And when they asked her about Black men getting the vote and women not getting the vote, she had a comment which was really beautiful. She said, "The colored men know what it is to be deprived of the ballot, and I am sure they will do what they can to release white and colored women from the same humiliating state of silent slavery." Yeah, isn't that rich? I thought that was amazingly rich. And then finally in the exhibit, I do have, in 1911, of course, we got the right to vote, so the history of Petaluma's participation dies out. But thanks to a wonderful woman, Chase Livingston, who has donated a wonderful selection of her collection for the exhibit, we have something about Lydia Flood Jackson and her quote about, even though we women in California have the vote now, we need to help our sisters in the East. So not only is she saying, let's help our sisters in the East, but I am a Black woman and I'm helping white women, and I am lifting as I climb. So the beauty there and the love and the wonderful attitude of lifting as we climb within the Black Women's Club movement was inspirational for me. It makes the hairs on my arm every time I say it, lifting as we climb. What a beautiful solution to the problem.
Well, and that really sticks out to me. I believe that you said, I think I caught it correctly, that Naomi Talbot Anderson called it sidelined slavery. I'm sorry, that the Black men would release white and colored women from the same humiliating state of silent slavery. Silence. Okay.
Silent slavery.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting. Oh, and the other thing that John pointed out to me, John Sheehy, he said these Black people in 1870 signed this petition for women to have the right to vote when those Black men still, and the 15th Amendment had not been signed, and they did not have the right to vote. But these 4 Black citizens of Petaluma were signing a petition for women to have the right to vote.
Wow. Very powerful.
Is that powerful?
Yeah. And it's important to mention too that as we're celebrating this year in 2020, the 100th anniversary and the centennial of the 19th Amendment, that the 15th Amendment celebrated 150 years its anniversary. So let me see if I can get this correct. It's called the sesquicentennial. I think I almost got it.
I think you did, yeah.
So 150 years for that, and it's all an evolving process. I think that as we learn about history, as you're sharing, as Molly's sharing, and I hope that those that are listening are grasping onto it and understanding as we have. Molly, I know for more than 40 years, and Paula and myself maybe over the last year or two. In putting on these events and things with the project and museums and whatnot, is that our democracy is evolving, that our democracy's history is evolving. And so there is no perfection. I believe, that's been said over and over again, but it's really the work that all the people do within our society that truly makes a difference. Those being the abolitionists or the suffragists are now, those that are protesting with the Black Lives Matter, and those that are calling for social justice, those that go into elected positions, and those that create exhibits and create wonderful organizations like the National Women's History Alliance. So I want to give a shout out to those people that are joining us online. Thank you so much for doing so. I want to make sure that you know where to go on our website to find more about the 19th Amendment Centennial Series. I also want to let you know that I do see that we do have some questions that are coming up. So those will be addressed hopefully within the next 10 minutes or so. We're going to keep following up with questions with Molly and Paula here online as part of our kickoff of the 19th Amendment Centennial Series with Sonoma County 2020 Women's Suffrage Project. So Molly MacGregor of the National Women's History Alliance, you talked a little bit earlier about getting that education into the schools and having the Santa Rosa School District and Sonoma County schools so receptive, and thankfully so that the project at that time could get kicked off 40 years ago and become what it is today, the National Women's History Alliance. My question that comes to mind now is, as we're facing the pandemic and education is going to this online distance learning, and you may or may not have given any thought to this, but our children are staying home. Education is flipped on its side at best, maybe on its head right now. And I know a lot of parents are out there, doing the best that they can. Teachers are doing the best they can. Thank you, teachers. Thank you, parents. I wonder if someone like yourself, Molly, are you worried or are you optimistic when it comes to women's history? And is this new tactic of distance online learning, is it going to push women's history back and create a visibility issue for women's history? Or because of our technology and because there's so many resources online, do you think that it's actually going to create a situation where there's just a plethora of women's history and people are going to learn even more and at a more rapid pace, and there's just more opportunity for that? So I might be stumping you a little bit, but I bet not, because I bet that this is something that you've been thinking about. And young girls and boys today what do you forecast for them? Is women's history going to be something that is important?
Well, I'm very optimistic. I mean, these young people, we see them, we see their ideas. My God, I am just overwhelmed and amazed. And the thing of it is that people need to ask the questions so that they can pursue the answers. And we used to be the Google of women's history. We were the Facebook of women's history for all those years before Google and Facebook existed. But we still got lots and lots and lots of questions. We moved from the Women's History Week for the first 7 years until Women's History Month in 1987. And then, of course, we began this whole push for Women's Equality Day. Our goal, of course, is to encourage questions about women. The questions always determine the answers, and kids are flabbergasted sometimes to find out some of the things that women have done. And then at the same time, they're over the top to tell you what they know about women. So, no, I'm so optimistic about this new generation. They have skills that I don't even know if I aspire to have them, but they have them, and there's so much information. It's just, again, the whole thing about how do you check your facts? How do you make sure that what you're saying is accurate? At least have a couple of sources or 3 sources. When we first started doing women's history, it was high school history teachers who challenged us. They said, oh, this couldn't be true. And so we learned from the get-go that you need to be able to substantiate what you had to say. There's much less feelings about that today, but there's also an extraordinary, expansive idea about who women are and what we can do. And I remember when Geraldine Ferraro was nominated as Vice President of the United States. Mary Rustatter and I were doing training in Utah, and her husband called us and said, turn on the TV. Wanda's going to nominate Geraldine Ferraro as Vice President. And we looked at each other and said, oh, yeah, in a pig's ear, that's going to happen. So here we are, all these years later, and we knew that Biden was going to nominate a woman. We just didn't know which woman. And these young girls, my nieces growing up, looking at these role models, of course they can do it. Oh no, I feel so encouraged. I feel so excited about young people and their ideas, and I think they need a lot of support. This is not an easy time to live through. So I think that in any ways that we can support them and encourage them and ask them questions, and probably more than anything, listen to what they have to say, oh yeah, a new day has definitely already dawned.
Yeah, definitely. I had this feeling that you would be more optimistic than challenged by that. And I also want to tie that into something that Paula was saying earlier about the history of the history, and that the study of the history of women's history and of the women's suffrage history itself. Nowadays we could talk to a young girl or a boy, a teen, a young adult, and they might not readily comprehend how much harder it was for people to find information 20 years, 40 years, 50 years ago, when Paula was talking about just having a couple of the Black couples in Petaluma to find information. Well, I would assume it's not as if we had, tens of thousands of bits of information about white women either at that time, 100 years or 100 plus years ago. It's quite hard to find those facts sometimes just because it wasn't written down. I love to encourage young women and encourage young people in general to be involved in the civic process, to have their names attached to letters to the editor, to comments during your city council meetings, to exhibits, become involved in all ways that you can, and have your name attached, because that is part of your living legacy and your history that you're creating for the generations that are going to come, and they're going to look back and want to find out what you were doing. So more than a Facebook, we could have our names attached to things in our community. And speaking of having your name attached to something, I want to definitely talk about Indigenous women and their role in the suffrage movement and in suffrage history, because what some might not know readily is that Indigenous women were the inspiration for the suffrage movement and for the beginnings during the time in Seneca Falls when the Women's National Convention happened for the very first time. So I'll put that out there for either Paula or Molly to talk about. I know, Molly, you have good friends that have done a lot of research on this topic and know some of the women that live today that are direct descendants of the Indigenous women in upstate New York. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how important that is, that the Indigenous women had many rights before the white women of the colonized United States and our government, and how that affects what we're talking about today.
Well, the Hagendashi, or as we call them, the Iroquois, were in upstate New York, and they were matrilineal. They were a matrilineal group, and so in their culture, men and women shared power in really different ways. It was the clan's mother who selected the leader. But if the leader in any way lied or hurt a woman or whatever, he was immediately deposed. So Lucretia Mott, who was one of the people that's often not mentioned in the suffrage movement, but was a Quaker woman. She was very much involved also with the Hagendashi. And so they had seen, that whole thing about role models, they had seen how different it could be. And the Quakers already were kind of 1 foot into it being different, because Quaker women could be preachers and all of that. But the native people, the indigenous people there, had a whole different view of what power was, how you shared it, and what matrilineal, what a matrilineal tribe was. I think about a husband coming home and all of his things are outside the teepee, and it's like, goodbye, Joe. But again, it comes back to that whole thing about power. And Matilda Jocelyn Gage, who was very much involved in the women's suffrage movement, she, along with Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, wrote, I think, the first 3 or 4 chapters, editions of the women's suffrage movement. She eventually was inducted actually as a clansmother because she was so close to that group. So we can never underestimate the influence of seeing role models that do things differently, that have a whole different way of living and understanding, that doesn't have to be that you have to give up your children, your salary, your whatever, because here's a whole group of women that wouldn't even consider such a thing. So Sally Rush Wagner has written several books about this, and I strongly suggest people take a look because it just gives us such a richer sense of what it means to be an American, of what we have borrowed from the people who were here first, the indigenous people. You know, we call them Native Americans. Well, they really were indigenous people. And they were, not all Native people were like the Iroquois, but there they were as this model for what women's liberation, women's power could be.
Yeah, it's just so inspiring and so important to mention at this time as we celebrate the centennial of the 19th Amendment, that 72-year struggle that started in Seneca Falls wouldn't have started without that, potentially wouldn't have started without that inspiration, and the indigenous women with all of their rights that they had within their tribes and within their clans, to hold their money, to have a vote. You know, the men wouldn't take a vote without the women being there, and we can still learn from the indigenous peoples. And I'm very proud to say that we'll have 2 indigenous women as part of our series this upcoming Friday, and on Saturday we have women that will be giving their oral histories So Maria Salinas on Saturday at 3 o'clock, and on Friday, Cristina Ramirez Reyes will be with us, and they'll be speaking in their native language. They'll be self-translating to Spanish, and there'll be English subtitles, and that's all due to the wonderful, amazing work of another co-chair of our suffrage project, Bernice Espinoza. So shout out to Bernice for doing all of that hard work. And Paula, going back to inspiration and dedication, really, I know that you've got your dedication coming up on August 26th on Women's Equality Day, and you're dedicating your exhibit to some special folks. And I'd love to hear your take on that and why this dedication is happening, and share a little bit about that with everybody.
Before I tell you about that, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
Sally Roche Wagner and her work about the Indigenous Americans and women's suffrage. You know, when you're curating an exhibit about a community like Petaluma and you want to pull in other issues, it's a challenge. And I wanted to say something about Sally Roche Wagner's scholarship, and so I did pull it in. And what I've done at the exhibit is followed quite loyally the story of Petaluma's participation, because I wanted to stay true to the theme of my exhibit. But on the tables underneath, I've put the other things that people might want to know about. And so a copy of Sally's book is there, and there was a wonderful marketing image for her book, with the Native American in the center and Susan B. Anthony and I think Gage or Stanton, I forget which one, or maybe all three, behind this beautiful Native American woman. And I said, well, the Seneca Falls influenced the Petaluma suffragists, but guess who influenced Katie Stanton and Elizabeth and Susan B. Anthony? So I just kept working to pull those kind of important points into the exhibit, and I worked hard to do that, and I think that adds to its value immensely. So I want people to know that if they come see this exhibit, they will get both sides. They'll get the full story. They'll get the full story.
Thank you for doing that.
Absolutely necessary to enrich the experience for the viewer. So the dedication, yeah, that's fun. I decided we needed to dedicate the exhibit to someone in Petaluma, a Petaluma woman. And of course, who came to my mind, first of all, of course, is the Honorable Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey. And I did a lot of research on her because, it's very easy to do because her papers are now at Sonoma State. And the amount of work that she did for women, for children, for families, for the environment, she worked tirelessly for 20 years. And what she was able, and for peace. So she is a wonderful role model as a woman. And, it's fascinating that she pulled herself up. She's the American success story. She pulled herself up from being a mother on welfare to being a congresswoman. And in his 1995 State of the Union address, President Clinton called her out. And it's so heartwarming because at that calling her out at the State of the Union, the entire floor stood up, bipartisan, both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats all stood to applaud her and her success. So what a wonderful woman to dedicate the exhibit to. And I know that she's been honored nationally, internationally, statewide, countywide, but this was her little hometown's opportunity to thank her for what she's done for women and for families. And the other woman who's being honored is Mayor Helen Putnam. Yeah. And my co-curator Catherine is in charge of that aspect of the dedication, and she has some wonderful clips and photos of Helen Putnam, who was the first female mayor of Petaluma.
Yeah, and quite a character from what I understand. Very colorful. So and one of our county parks is named after her, and we need more names. Molly, I'm looking forward to the day that your name will be adorned on maybe a monument in Sonoma County or a building at Sonoma State. I really would love to have more names of significant women that have made an impact in our community as part of our community and to take their rightful place. So thank you, Paula, for doing that. Now, you did mention, Paula, that we to have people attend the exhibit. So I want to clarify, we're in a pandemic. There's COVID-19 precautions. If the public health officer is listening in, why don't you assure her as well? And that is Dr. Sundari Mace. We want to give her some props. She's been taking care of all of us here in Sonoma County and the entire health team with the county of Sonoma. So if you can clarify for us how people participate in the dedication, how they participate with the exhibit, how is this going to get pulled off?
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question and giving me the opportunity to let people know. It's been a bit of a challenge because I keep editing the events list. So the dedication was originally going to be a reception at the museum, and obviously that was changed to the live stream. And we're having fun creating that, a big learning curve for me and many people at the Petaluma Museum Association, but we're having fun. And we're very excited because Congressman Huffman will participate. First, the PMA is so honored to have Congressman Huffman participate to honor Lynn. And Dr. Frank Chong, the president of Santa Rosa Junior College, will be there to honor Lynn as well. Paul Heavenridge from Literacy Works at the Santa Rosa Junior College will be there to honor Lynn as well. So it's going to be an exciting event. So as far as the exhibit is concerned, I have dressed the gallery. The gallery is completely dressed. I've been having fun. I've been going in at night. The museum has been closed to everyone but staff, and the wonderful collection manager there, Salon Rusek, has done a beautiful job of making sure that all protocols are followed appropriately. Only a few people are allowed in at a time. That's why they've asked me to dress the gallery in the evening, which has been a delight for me because I've been able to do it alone, and I work well if I'm not interrupted. And I've had fun doing that. So I am going to be, my friend Kay Chandler is going to be recording a videotape of my gallery lecture inside the museum on this coming Friday. Hopefully it will be available online before the dedication. It'll be available on the 25th. And it will be thorough. I mean, I will take you through the entire exhibit. So that will be, as I said, pre-recorded and online by the 25th of this month in just a few days. The next event in the roll call of events to celebrate is a reading by the Petaluma Readers Theater, headed up by Jennifer Marsh. And she and I, said we need to go pre-recorded. Yep. It's going to be pre-recorded in the museum, which is a wonderful space for them to record it in. And I'm very excited because she has selected to recite the speech by Abigail Goodwin Haskell, who was Petaluma's premier pioneer suffragist and quite an amazing gal. And she did speak in front of the California legislature. And what she has to say is just delightful. She mentions Turkish harems. It's great. You're going to love it. And Jennifer Marsh's group is going to be pre-recorded in the museum. The next event doesn't begin until October. So we didn't say it would be pre-recorded or live streamed. We put it down as an actual event. Whatever happens, we will adjust. We will adjust as needed.
Right. And all of these events will be available on our website as well. So they'll be at the Petaluma Historical Museum, Petaluma Museum Association's website, as well as the Sonoma County 2020 Women's Suffrage Project and that website. So we're getting to close to the end of our hour. We've got about 6 minutes left. I do want to just make you all aware it has been a very well attended event. We've had upwards to about 35 to 38 participants at the highest point. So thank you again to all of our viewers. I did get a question from one of our viewers asking if there was a video of all the participants and that they were only seeing my face. I apologize for that. That kind of scares me a little tiny bit, but it might be something to do with how Zoom is set up on someone's computer. I don't have control over everybody's monitor, so next time it reminds me that I will go through some instructions at the beginning of how to set up those screens. And then we've actually had some questions from some project members here, including our co-chair. So Bernice Espinoza wanted to give a shout out to you, Paula. Thank you for mentioning Catherine's participation. It was so important to us and with the project, and she supported us so much. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for, as Bernice says, bringing all of the great information tonight with you. Molly as well. There were some questions about Molly's camera, and unfortunately Molly doesn't have a camera, and Molly's going OG, original old school on us, and without a camera, this is how we are having Molly participate. So and in order for people to know who Molly was, this is why I created this screen that had both Molly and Paula's picture on it, so that at least we would be able to see Molly's beautiful face as she sat there. She's actually reading in that picture. Molly, you want to give a little shout out to what you're reading in that picture?
I'm reading Bob Cooney's Winning the Vote, The Triumph of the American Women's Suffrage Movement.
Yeah, it's a Bible. For those of you that Paul is saying, yes, it is a Bible. It's a very hefty Bible. It's robust in its weight as well as its contents. And so Robert Cooney, thank you so much for doing, I know, a lot of work, many, many years in order to bring us that work. And Molly, I know with the National Women's History Alliance, I know very well that many of these books that we mentioned tonight are available on your website. Can you tell us a little bit about, give us the call letters?
Well,
for
yes,
your website?
Definitely. Come visit our website. It's www.nationalwomen'shistoryalliance.org. And you'll see that one of the sections is National Women's History NWHA store. But also there's a whole section on the centennial. There's a whole section on women's history throughout the year, and most of it is downloadable. So please, use it, spread it. I come from an Irish Catholic family, so I say go forth and multiply and fill the planet with women's history stuff. So please do that. Anything that we have up on our website, you can use. That's why we put it up there.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great website. It is used extensively by educators across the country, and I find quite a few gifts as well as personal things on that website for myself. So I really appreciate it being there. It's such a great resource. I know that you've talked about having some face masks that are coming in that will have vote and your logo for the centennial on there as well. I want to go back, Suzanne, thank you so much. You commented about the book. It has lots and lots of wonderful pictures. Yes, it does. And she thanks you, Molly, for all of your work these past 40 plus years, I know. Molly, those years, if there is a great expanse up above, you are certainly going through the doors. So you've done your job. Molly, from Maggie Fishman, Maggie, I know you're one of our Santa Rosa Junior College. Thank you to the Santa Rosa Junior College for being one of our collaborators on the Sonoma County 2020 Women's Suffrage Project. Maggie Fishman is one of the board members for the Santa Rosa Junior College, and she's given you a tip here, Molly, that webcams are inexpensive, and she got one for her computer, and she's not so old school anymore. And Maggie, I'm going to let you know that Molly's birthday is coming up in October. So, and then from DB, looking forward to Paula's live stream tour. I know, what a wonderful thing. There's going to be a live stream tour of the museum show.
It will be pre-recorded.
Pre-recorded, yes.
Yeah, and it will be available anytime after the 25th.
Yeah, and then DB does ask if we can answer this question. Can anybody speak to the Ida B. Wells involvement in the 1913 suffrage parade? And it's okay, those of you that are looking at your time, I realize it is 6:30 right now. Zoom is not going to crash on us. We're going to be able to keep going a little bit longer. I do have a little bit of a sum up at the end, but maybe Molly, you can answer that question about Ida B. Wells and her involvement in the 1913 suffrage parade. And I want to preface that with saying that the news shows right now on cable networks, MSNBC and CNN and others, as soon as Kamala Harris was announced as the VP candidate with Biden, they started to talk a little bit more about Ida B. Wells and that 1913 suffrage parade, because I believe that Kamala Harris and Ida B. Wells were in the same sorority. So I believe that was the connection right there. So if you can talk about that parade in 1913, what a glorious moment. But Ida B. Wells might be arguing with me on that point. So take it away, Molly.
Sorry, I was on mute. Ida B. Wells was this courageous, incredible anti-lynching advocate. I mean, talk about someone who was totally fearless. She documented the numbers of lynching that had happened in the South in a book called The Red Book. She ended up living in Chicago, being very, very much involved in the suffrage movement, as were many black women. And as it was at the big parade in 1913, Alice Paul was a little nervous about having black women participate in the parade because she was so trying to recruit Southern women and Southern votes. And so she had basically said that the black women could participate, but all the women from Howard were at the end of the parade. And Ida B. Wells basically said, oh yeah, in a pig's ear. And so as soon as the Illinois contingent went by, Ida joined them. And there just isn't enough you can say about someone who was fearless, and she was. She dealt with these people that were easily ready to lynch her, and she basically said, you know, justice is more important. So I can't say enough about Ida B. Wells, except it's so wonderful that she's finally being recognized, and there's all these images that are coming up about Ida B. Wells across the country. So
yeah, and thank you for that question. I want to say thank you for that question. Because it has been something that's been tossed back and forth on a lot of media channels right now, and it's very topical. So that fearlessness of Ida B. Wells, it's something to aspire to. And Paula, you wanted to interject on that?
I wanted to ask Molly a question. Molly, did I not see on the National Women's Alliance webpage that Ida B. Wells' image had been put in a gigantic floor mosaic in the New York subway?
Yes, it's one of those beautiful images that have been put on the floor. We put it as the lead image of the latest update we did on the Centennial, and it's on our website. It's downloadable, or you can just email me and I'll send it to you. My email is N as in National, W as in Women, H as in History, P as in Project 1980 @gmail.com. But yeah, that's an image of Ida B. Wells. And the other thing I wanted to tell people is that they're putting images of women up on Mount Rushmore. So they're taking images of women and projecting them up there for the 26th. And again, women from very diverse backgrounds. So it's going to be grand. I mean, it's just unbelievable the kind of creativity and work that women and men have done to make this celebration really full throttle. So we're very excited.
Yeah, well, that was a great share. I saw that on your social media page as well, and we shared that on the projects page. That was gorgeous and overdue. As far as, you know, we need to see again more pictures, more mosaics, more murals, more monuments, more names of buildings and parks. We want women. We want women out there. We want our names out there. We want to see it, and we want, Washington Street to be Wells, and we want to know that it was Ida B. Wells. So across America.
Leslie, there was just one more thing as we're saying this on on Sunday, on the 26th, of course it's in New York, so we'd have to get up early for it, but they're going to live stream it, and they're going to dedicate the first monument in Central Park that's ever been dedicated to women, and it's Sojourner Truth and Susan Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and they're going to use it as the kickoff for next year. It's not going to be the culmination of 2020. It's going to be the kickoff for us to carry this through to 2021.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to acknowledge that so much work has gone into 2020 and it's continuing on. So thank you to all of those that are doing that, like Molly. And thank you to Paula for bringing us the exhibit and for continuing events beyond your exhibit. And I know that you've got things going on basically until the election in November 3rd. So just a few final thoughts, maybe a website address, Paula, and just to finish that out, and then I'll say a few words and we'll let people go. We could talk about this for a semester, Maggie Fishman, our SRJC board member. Give us a whole semester, why don't you? And we'll just talk about women's history. Oh, you've got great professors. So, but Paula, take that away and give us your last thoughts.
PetalumaMuseum.com, and all the information is there. All the events are listed, which begin on the 26th, and the last one is in early November. And everyone, I just have to say it, I took my vote buttons off at the museum. At the museum, we had buttons made, vota and vote. And at the very end of the display wall, everyone's welcome to help themselves to a free vota or vote button. So one of my big goals for this exhibit was to encourage people to get out and vote.
Yeah, definitely get out and vote. And Molly, any last words, or you want to say that website address?
We'll have those vote masks ready after the 20th, I think. They will be available. They're purple, and they have the big word vote across them, and then our logo, Valiant Women of the Vote logo. So we just want to keep remembering we're in a quick kickoff from Women's Equality Day to November 3rd, and we're going to remind people constantly about how important it is that they vote.
Yeah, definitely. Great segue. Thank you, both of you, for being the kickoff of this online centennial of the 19th Amendment event series. The Sonoma County 2020 Women's Suffrage Project thanks both of you. We thank all of our viewers and our participants. They're thanking us right now. Francis and Diana, I see you saying thank you all and appreciations for that. The recording of...
Well, thank you, Leslie, for organizing all of this. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, my pleasure, my pleasure. This has been quite a learning curve this past couple years, and I've grown a lot. So thank you to both of you for being part of that, and the members and the co-chair, Bernice Espinoza, for allowing that growth as well. So I want to say a quick reminder that a recording of tonight's event will be available if it worked on our Facebook page, but I know that it's recording right now, and that recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and all of those links will be available on our website. Our website address is right here at socowomen2020.org, and I want to make sure that you, if you're still watching and participating, or maybe watching this online later as a recording, to join us for the rest of our events, the entire 19th Amendment Centennial Series. All of that information is also on our website, that address right there on the screen. Coming up next, we're just talking about voting just a second ago and how important that is on Thursday, August 20th, so just a couple days away, on 5:30 p.m. We'll see you right back here on Zoom, as well as Facebook Live, for our next event called Voting and Census Facts. And we will be chatting with Sonoma County Registrar of Voters, Diva Marie Proto, and Vince Harper with the community engagement. He's the community engagement director for the Community Action Partnership in Sonoma County. And voting facts and census facts. So bring your questions. I know everybody has lots of questions. We won't tell you how to vote, but we're certainly going to give you some more information about the voting process and about how important the census is. So once again, I want to thank everyone so much for joining us. This has been so much fun, and I'm looking forward to watching this recording. It has been a wonderful kickoff to our centennial. And remember that today is a special day because it's the centennial of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. And we are so looking forward to all of our events right up through Women's Equality Day on August 26th. So we look forward to having you all in attendance throughout our series. Thank you for participating, and good night.